You know, Simone, my favorite texter, Michael Steele text, where he just says, I have a few things I'd like to say.
He was like, you know what I got? I'm going to say it. I'm going to say my piece. Your people acting real crazy, Mr. Chairman. Crazy.
I just wish people would just get off stupid at this point because, you know, everyone's acting like this. They're trying to force it into this normal space, and they you know, somehow now you have, you know, an individual who has been convicted by a jury of his peers on 34 counts. It wasn't like it was, 17 out of 34 or 5 out of 34. It was all 34 counts. And yet people, and particularly those inside my party right now, who have just absolutely are the worst at this. And it's frustrating to listen to the Marco Rubio, especially someone like Marco Rubio, who served as a state elected official, is now a federal officer, you know, elected official, who sits there and is deriding the system the way he is. He knows better. And that, for me, is the worst part. So the question is, how do we then shake people to understand that this is not normal and that, to your point, Donald Trump will be on the ballot this November because our Constitution does not kick him off. So we now have even more a civic responsibility to assess whether or not you want to put a convicted individual in the presidency. And what does that say about us as a country, that we have now devalued the rule of law to the point that someone can crime all day long, 34 times, get convicted, not be held accountable because we've just made them president of the United States?
It's just so, it is just truly unbelievable. And people really did not realize that a conviction would not take him off the ballot. I'm talking about regular folks.
Right.
You see it all over social media. I got so many text messages. People were calling like, so he could still run? Yes, honey, he could still run and he could still win. So you all need to vote, which is, I know it sounds crazy because everybody I know that has been convicted of a felony, and I do know a couple people, they did not get to participate in the electoral process right after.
Just real quick, you make a very interesting point. Y'all realize in this election, Donald Trump can't even vote for himself because he's now been convicted of crimes. So what does that tell you?
Potentially, yes. Well, I mean, he is registered in Florida, and in the Florida rules say if you have been convicted
in New York,
and you've been sentenced, yes. But if you've been convicted and sentenced, well, you know, see, we about to go down the legal rabbit hole. But the fact that it's even a question is crazy. It's crazy, and I refuse to sit here like it is normal. And the Byron Donalds, the Marco Rubios, the men of color in the Republican Party who are standing up here behind Donald Trump, yelling and shouting that he has somehow been unfairly targeted by a system is insane when we all watch with our eyes the system bend over backwards to make exceptions for him. I used to do juvenile justice work for a very long time, reform work, and it is, any of the young black men and women and young Latino and Latinas who were in court, I never saw them get to walk out of the courthouse and have a camera right there to say their piece. They could not deride and talk badly about the judge and the system and the process and not be thrown in jail. And so the idea that this system somehow is unfair to Donald Trump,
a 78-year-old white man.
A 78-year-old white man who has lied about his wealth, now that we know, thank you, Tish James, who has lied about his wealth. But the problem is Donald Trump has never been met with accountability his entire life. This is the first time, this and him having to take that mugshot in Georgia is the first time that he has ever been met with real accountability.
I'd like Marco and Byron to now advocate for young men of color who are currently in the system and are being tried by the very same justice system that Donald Trump has just gone through. So there are some courthouses, that you can come. We got a few in Prince George's County, Maryland. You can come and we can go and we can advocate for those young men because, man, this system is so unfair. So if it's unfair for Donald Trump, it's got to be unfair for them, too. I don't hear that advocacy. Where's that advocacy? And that just points out, to me at least, just the utter, what's the word I want right now at this hour of the morning? Craziness. We'll go with that. The craziness of all of this, because at the end of the day, you're lying and you're perpetrating and you're showing yourselves to be fools for a man who otherwise could care less about you and the things that you're concerned about. So I just think we need to be honest and real here. Don't listen to all this stuff coming from my side of the aisle right now, because they head in a very, very, very dark place right now, and we need not go there. Mm-hmm. We need not go there.
An open invitation from the chairman.
Welcome back to The Weekend, everyone. New this morning, Donald Trump telling lies. Well, that's actually not that new, is it? And he's lashing out at the federal government in his first interview since being convicted 34 felony counts for falsifying business records. Take a listen.
It's a scam. And the Republican Party is really, they stick together in this. They see it's weaponization of the Justice Department, of the FBI. And, you know, that's all coming out of Washington. You may think it's brag. Take a look at who opened the case. I'm not allowed to talk about it because I have a gag order.
Joining us now is former FBI General Counsel Andrew Weissmann. He is a law professor at New York University. Also with us is MSNBC legal analyst Mary McCord. She is the former Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division. And Andrew and Mary are the co-hosts of the Webby Award-winning podcast, Prosecuting Donald Trump. All right.
Good morning, friends. We talked about attacks on the justice system, and I do want to get to that. But I think it is important to underscore that in addition to attacking the judge, to attacking DOJ, to attacking all the institutions, he's also attacking the jury itself, right? These are just average citizens who did their civic duty, and he is still going after them in the aftermath.
So one of the things that is notable is that this jury sort of valued and honored its oath more than lots of people in the United States Congress, and certain judges and justices. I mean, they really stood up and just did their job. It is normal for a defendant to say it was unfair. I mean, that's what they do. They don't usually own what they're doing when they go to trial. So for Donald Trump to say that is fine. It's false, but it's like that's what defendants do. But the tell is that if he really wanted to sort of say, you know what, this is all a witch hunt, why is he delaying 3 other trials? Why doesn't he say, you know what, those Florida jurors, they're going to be my people. Well, why he's not going to trial, doesn't want to go to trial there, he doesn't want to go to trial in Georgia, he doesn't want to go to trial in D.C. That is because of what just happened in New York, which is a jury of 12 people picked, with his input, found unanimously beyond a reasonable doubt. And for those of us who are in the courtroom, it's easy to put a label on this and say, oh, it's unfair and it's rigged. But let me just give you one example. David Pecker, his friend, was largely uncross-examined by Donald Trump. At no point did he say he's lying. And he said that we had this conspiracy to fix the 2016 election.
It's crazy. It's so, Mary, let's talk about the new felon in our midst, because I think it's important to point out that Donald Trump is a felon. That's F-E-L-O-N, for those of you who need that help. The New York City Probation Department is going to conduct an interview and generate a sentencing recommendation for Justice Merchan. This will be a moment where Donald Trump essentially confronts not just what got him into this situation, but his whole life story. This aspect of this process is very, very probing. During that interview, a convict can try to make a good impression and explain why he or she deserves, a lighter punishment. I was a good member of the community before this happened, all that stuff. But it is a chance for them to create an impression as Judge Merchan decides to, mete out the punishment. How do you think that's going to go?
Well, I can hardly imagine, frankly, Mr. Trump sitting for that interview and it going well. But one thing that's so different about this case than the cases of so many individuals who do have this interview before they go to sentencing, and for who it is so important, is that we know so much about Mr. Trump's history, right? I mean, the whole country does, the whole world does. And normally, it's much more common for a defendant who's gone through a trial, who's been found guilty by a jury, that the probation officer and the judge don't really know that much about the defendant as a person other than their crimes, right? The things that the evidence were put on about at the trial. So it's always important to be able to convey what their upbringing was like, what their education was like, what challenges they faced in life, what challenges they overcame in life, right? Whether they are thought by others in their community to be good people, whether they've expressed remorse, et cetera, et cetera. We don't kind of need that for Donald Trump. That's already known. It seems, to my mind, almost a little silly to even go through this process with respect to him. But when we do get in front of, when he does get in front of Judge Merchan, I mean, the things that typically somebody would get credit for, I just think some of those things will be lacking. Things like accepting responsibility.
He's saying, Mary, the man is saying to play the side, please, because Donald Trump is claiming he did nothing wrong. He said it today.
The judge could decide to say, hey, house arrest or even jail. How do you face what that could look like?
I'm okay with it. I saw one of my lawyers the other day on television saying, oh, no, you don't want to do that to the president. I said, you don't beg for anything. You just, the way it is.
The other one I wanted to play was, he said, I did absolutely nothing wrong. Yeah. Think of it.
So,
that doesn't sound like men that sorry.
He's entitled, as a matter of his appeal, to be contesting, that the guilty verdict. But accepting the jury's rendering of a verdict, that is something core to our system. Mm-hmm. And, the judge will be also looking at things like, the reason for the scheme. The judge will look to see, what other cases, what kinds of sentences have been meted out for falsification of business records, and what were they falsifying them for. Oftentimes, the motive for that is financial gain, right, to yourself or to somebody else. Here, it's completely different. It's undermining the results of a presidential election. So very significant. So there's many, many things the judge will be looking at, but I have a hard time thinking that interview with the pretrial services folks is going to be that meaningful.
It's going to give way to a lot.
You should feel free, Andrew Weissman, to weigh in on this question of sentencing, but I am also curious, given that Mary referenced appeal there, if you think there actually are any grounds for appeal.
Well, the grounds for appeal, it's hard to see that they're terribly meritorious.
Right, because what they're going to say is that the judge had a conflict of interest.
Yeah, that's already been ruled on. Right. This is a de minimis amount of money. I mean, we're talking about less than $50. And, it's a mistake. He should not have done it. But it's already been decided. So that's just not going to go anywhere. And the one thing I would say is for those people who were in the courtroom, I mean, obviously there's a transcript of everything, but if you were in the courtroom, this judge was so remarkable. The idea that $35 made any difference, I mean, he was so careful and ruled in favor of Donald Trump on all sorts of things.
In part because of an awareness about the fact that this could move to appeal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, to make sure it was a clean trial. But also, I think, just out of, he has a different role. His role is to be a judge, which is to be impartial and to, weigh and assess what is fair to a defendant. That is what his role is. And so I don't think that's a terribly good ground. I think there'll be some legal grounds about the nature of the charge. I think factually, that's where I see it being the weakest for making any sort of claim here. The judge, is so experienced, and it's also so well respected.
Well, the argument we're going to hear, just because here's the thing, people are going to be around their kitchen tables with Trump supporters who are going to repeat everything that they're hearing from Donald Trump and from his allies. So let's just get into it, which is one of the things they're going to say is, well, this was weak case law. Right? This is so thin. This is so shallow. How is it possible that the first person who's brought up on this is the former president of the United States?
Okay, so not the first person. False business records are charged all the time. It is true that, I was responding to this on Friday where someone said, oh, but these charges were sort of tailored to Donald Trump. And I'm like, all charges are tailored to the defendant. I mean, I was like, what does that mean? I was trying to relate it to, I used to organize crime cases when we prosecuted Vincent Gigandi under RICO. Guess what? Those charges were tailored to the facts. When we looked at Enron, the CEOs, those charges were tailored to those facts. So here, as Mary alluded to, these charges, the false business records, are tailored to these facts. And frankly, as Mary said, these facts are much, much worse than most false business records because the scheme that the jury found, just to be clear, beyond a reasonable doubt, was interference in the 2016 election. That was the goal, and that had to be found by the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think that sort of claim of this is, unique and different and somehow unfair, that I think is going to fall on deaf ears. And it's, just to be clear, it is so disrespectful of jurors. I mean, what they're really saying is that 12 people, just average American citizens, you know what, we should just disregard because somehow, even though we were not in court, we know better than jurors who took an oath of office, and they should be disregarded.
Mary, the next phase of this, Andrew's touched on it a little bit already. This gets up to an appeals process. What does DA Bragg do? What does this office do at this point? Are they still engaged at that level? Or is that going to be driven more by the defense going and making the case versus what we saw in the trial where the prosecution was making the case?
Yeah, it's up to the defendant is the one who will appeal here. Note the appeal. The defendant will have the opening brief. And because it's up to the defendant to decide what issues he's taking up to the Court of Appeals. And I handled appeals for nearly over a decade in the U.S. Attorney's Office defending convictions, right? And so what you do then as the prosecutor and what the DA's office will do is their brief will respond to what are alleged to be the errors pointed out by the defendant.
Original case.
That's right. And, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that, there might be lots of possible things that a defendant could appeal on, but they really need to choose the ones that are sort of load-bearing, that would make a difference, So even when there are errors, maybe an evidentiary error, they doesn't necessarily mean a conviction is reversed. The error could be harmless, right? And so you want to go for the defense is going to want to go for the type of errors that it thinks that if it prevails on will result in a reversal.
I just sparked Michael because what Mary is saying is the defense has to be strategic.
Yeah.
And they not good at strategery in that side of the fence.
Back with Michael Cohen. Before we went to break, you were talking about the press conference. And let's just be clear, it was not a press conference. It was a statement that was with the press as the audience, because at the press conference you take questions, that Donald Trump did on Friday.
Yeah, filled with a whole bunch of people that work in the building and so on. But as I was watching it, I just decided I had to put out something onto my Twitter account. I wrote, Trump's press conference was nothing shy of a bat-S crazy avalanche of broken brain word manure. Because that's really what it was. It was a rambling series of nonsense. But here's something that's interesting that no one's talking about. We're going to break it right here on the weekend. He's not even allowed to do that press conference in Trump Tower.
Why not?
Because he doesn't own the public space. If you look outside the door, it says open to the public. He gave away that space years ago, 40-plus years ago, in order to build the residential portion. That's how he obtained the FAR, the air rights, in order to go as high as he did for that property. He does not own it. Therefore, you need a permit. He was warned of this in 2016 during the campaign. But does Donald Trump care about the law? No. The same way he put out the clock on Fifth Avenue without permits. I mean, he just does things. The law doesn't apply to him the way it applies to the rest of us.
I think that's an important point, and it is a part of the psychology of Trump that I've always been fascinated by. And in my encounters with him earlier on in 13 or whatever, and then just watching him subsequently, it is very clear he's a man who believes I will do it unless you stop me. And he doesn't believe you can stop him. And there is some truth to that, Michael. I mean, you look at how our systems, our judicial system, our political systems, our media have just capitulated to his brand, his level of pugnacious, offensive behavior, treating it as entertainment, treating it as politically prescient in terms of how Republicans look at it. What is it about him that allows him to your point, do the thing he's not allowed by law, or by principle to do, and yet everything around him just kind of goes, okay.
Except, I will note, we're having this conversation in the context of the fact that he has been convicted of 34 felony counts.
I got that, but
State,
we are,
and $500 million in the New York Attorney General case, and another $100 million.
But folks,
just
we
about
are
to
8
EG.
years. We're 8 years into this, so we're at now we're at that point. But look at all the terrain that has been disrupted and burned to the ground before we got to that point. And that's what I'm talking. This accountability now is important, but along the way it wasn't there. So my question is, what was it about him that made people feel? I mean, the lawyers that didn't get paid, the people, and yet they come back. The banks who had defaults, and yet they would give him a loan the next time. What is it?
Yeah, it's unexplainable. I mean, I truly don't understand it either. Now, is Donald Trump entertaining? Absolutely. I mean, first of all, the Oompa Loompa-ish sort of look that goes on. I mean, how many people have made fun of the orange tan or the cotton candy hair and so on for years? He actually embraces the attacks. He believes anything negative said about him is a positive. I mean, that's a narcissistic sociopath by design. What he does is he makes everything about him. And for whatever the reason, people just go along. He brings out the worst in people
and they seem to like it.
They not only do they like it, they embrace it and they run with it.
And I want to know,
not like it. He about to go to jail, maybe. Okay.
Well, let's talk about that, because two questions for you. One, which is, having gone through this pre-sentencing hearing, I want to hear from you sort of what that experience is like and how you think he's going to do it. I've also heard you say you don't think he should go to prison, and I want to understand more about why.
Okay, so the first part, yes, I did go through that process, the pre-sentencing report, so thanks for bringing up a bad memory. Sure. It's a horrible process. You sit down with an individual and you basically have to open up your entire life to them, whether it's financial, whether it's medical. They need to know everything. And it is based upon that document that gets submitted to the judge for review, and the judge uses that in determining the sentence. Now, here we see, once again, to Mike's point, Donald is bombastic. They want to call me the bombastic one. They thought I was going to come onto the stand with a baseball bat or a 9-iron and start swinging it. Donald Trump is the only one every single day who went out there and attacked everybody, right? And again, he had a whole slew of members of Congress sitting behind him doing the same thing. That's going to determine the sentence, including the violations of the gag order, which I believe he did again yesterday. I still think the gag order is in place, and his behavior, his 10-minute rambling about me, he's violating the gag order. Do I think that he's going to be convicted? Absolutely. 100%. Do I think that Judge Merchan is going to sentence him to prison or to jail? The answer is no.
Right, but do you think you've also said that you don't think he should be sentenced to jail? And
I'm afraid of him going to jail.
Why?
And not for him, not for his safety. That's on him. He's got Secret Service protection. I'm more concerned for you and for all of us and our families and for the American people, because this clown had 4 years of being debriefed on national security issues. On top of that, if he becomes the Republican nominee, he gets debriefed again starting now. Think about this. America, think about this for a second. You have now a Republican leading candidate who is a felon who's going to be debriefed on national security issues, knowing how loose-lipped he is, how he's willing to give away America's secrets to Vladimir Putin or to anybody for money, or just simply for bragging rights. He did it with the Australian billionaire at Mar-a-Lago. He sat there in Helsinki with Vladimir Putin talking about national security issues, but nobody else was around except for Vladimir Putin's translator. I mean, these are not normal things. You don't allow somebody like Donald Trump to be declassified, especially now as a felon. So my concern is, in a prison situation, he's willing to give away these secrets, as I always say, for a bag of tuna or a book of stamps, and he will do it because he doesn't care. If America turns against him, he'd rather see America burn to the ground. And that's who Donald Trump is, plain and simple.
That part I believe. That I believe. Although I think his behind needs to go to jail. But
Well, well, you know what, Michael Cohen, will you stay for a little longer?
for you, absolutely.
We appreciate you. Michael Cohen is going to be here, and we will be right back. You're watching The Weekend. We're back with Michael Cohen. Thank you for sticking around,
So,
Mr.
Mike,
Chairman.
Not like I had a choice.
We did ask for permission.
Kind of locked him into the chair. A couple of things I want to touch on, but one of them I want to finish up on the prison portion here. There is this. See, here's where I come from. I get the whole former president thing. All right, okay. And I'm looking at all the former presidents before Trump, and none of them did any of this. None of them wound up in the court system, have been adjudicated, raping someone and all this other stuff. So by virtue of all of that, for me, all the entrapments of the presidency, being a former president, kind of go away. I mean, as a former lieutenant governor, if I go out and I start criming like Trump has crimed, right? I'm not going to be able to rely on the fact that I was once an elected official. We have countless elected officials that have come before Donald Trump, from the U.S. Senate, governors, et cetera, who do not have the benefit of their former office to protect them. And everyone kind of bend over backwards for them in the judicial process because of their former position. That's how I look at this. You forfeit that, Mr. Trump, when you behave the way you behave while you were in office and while you were trying to obtain that office. So for me, this idea of being the president, being treated that way when it comes to what is the penalty for your crime, the 34 counts is, okay, what would it be for anybody else? You get up to 4 years. All right, so it's 18 months plus community service. But there, for me, should not be a bar just because. I mean, you seem to think differently, and I understand the rationale.
In fact, I agree with you 100% on that. What I am
worried about
is I'm willing to put aside that for the fear of the danger that he will place, not he might, he will place America in if, in fact, that he is put into an institution, a jail or a prison. He will do it. There's no doubt in my mind. The same way that he did it while he was in office. The same when he was in Mar-a-Lago. And there's the recording of him trying to impress people by showing them secrets. We know for a fact that he gave away information on how many nuclear warheads are on a specific nuclear ship, one of our military vessels. I mean, think about how dangerous the information in that guy's head is, and he doesn't think. And we saw that from yesterday's press conference.
I guess it's something we're going to wrestle with for between now and July 11th until the sentencing. I will just note that, one, I don't think we can operate out of fear, because if that was the case, people wouldn't have held him accountable. I mean, you wouldn't even took the stand. And then the United States has now joined the rest of many other democracies in the Western world, Italy, France, Israel, who have held current and former presidents accountable in the legal system for criming, as the chairman would say, that they did when they were the president.
I want to end not by talking about Donald Trump, by talking about Michael Cohen. I want to take you back to 2019 and something that the late Representative Elijah Cummings said to you in a House Oversight Committee hearing. Take a listen.
I know that this has been hard. I know that you face a lot. I know that you are worried about your family. But this is a part of your destiny. And hopefully, this portion of your destiny will lead to a better Michael Cohen, a better Donald Trump, a better United States of America, and a better world.
Do you feel you're a better Michael Cohen?
I'm a different Michael Cohen than I was. I'll tell you, those words hit me the same way now as it did back then. He's a special man. I'll tell you, a lot of people don't know this, but that night he called me after, not to talk about the hearing, just to ask me if I was okay. And I said to him, one day I will be. I don't know how long it's going to take, but one day I will be. I'm not there yet. I'm far from okay. But hopefully his words come to fruition one day.
Well, you say you want peace, and you say you'll never get peace so long as Donald Trump is here.
Yeah, I don't believe I ever will.
Michael Cohen, as always, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Next, Lachlan Cartwright and Suzanne Craig are going to join the table.
Welcome back, everyone, to the weekend. Election interference was at the heart of the New York criminal case against Donald Trump. In his closing arguments, prosecutor Joshua Steinglass says, quote, "This scheme cooked up by these men at this time could very well be what got President Trump elected. This was overt election fraud, an act in furtherance of the conspiracy to promote Mr. Trump's election by unlawful means. Put more simply, those crimes directly contributed to Trump being elected president." Joining us now is Katie Phang. She's an attorney and host of the Katie Phang Show right here on MSNBC. And also with us, the founder of Democracy Docket and partner of the Elias Law Group, Mark Elias. Welcome to you both.
I love that reminder, Katie, that you are, in fact, an attorney. You don't just play one on TV. So,
right.
you know, there was a lot of critique about the fact that very often people in media would refer to this case as the hush money case. I would argue that that was in part to differentiate it from all of the other election interference.
Would you have to stop for a second to think about that, right?
Yes,
the fact
right.
that there's so many. So we have to differentiate that.
But I want you to just frame for us why it mattered that ultimately Bragg decided to pursue this as a question of election interference.
Yeah, so I wrote a piece for MS Online about why it was, as a legal concept, a novel theory in terms of trying to do this, because the case in and of itself, the New York election law statute, is not really prosecuted that often here. The falsification of business records, Alvin Bragg himself has referred to those as the bread and butter white collar cases for the Manhattan DA's office. But to elevate it to the felony is kind of the more novel thing. So Bragg actually, it took courage to do this. Why? Because you not only have to make sure that you have the probable cause and that you're able to meet all the elements of the crime, but when you're a prosecutor, you really have to stop and take stock of whether or not a jury is going to care about this kind of case. Will a jury say to itself, oh, it's just a hush money payment, why are you trying to make it into another thing that it's not? And that's kind of been the theme and the banner that the GOP's been running with to defend Donald Trump. But it matters because, and I've been saying this, and it kind of crystallized a little bit better for me as I got deeper and deeper into this case. That 2015 Trump Tower meeting I've called the original sin. And the reason why I call it that is when Pecker, Trump, and Cohen conspired to do the catch and kill schemes. And the reason why it's the original sin is, but for that meeting where they agreed to kill those negative stories and to promote the negative ones about Trump's opponents, he may have never made it into the Oval Office. And everything that has kind of spun off from that meeting and the successful catch and kill has led to him claiming absolute immunity as a president, has led to him stealing classified documents, has led to him having January 6th. So if we think about all of the indictments that came after he became president, maybe, just maybe, if he had never made it there in the first place, he never would have had these cases. We would never have had a January 6th. I mean, there's all of this stuff that kind of came as a domino effect from that meeting. And Bragg made you care about that meeting. Bragg put it on a way and set the table for you to understand it had nothing to do with him having sex with other people. It was nothing about just those two people having sex, whoever it was, him and someone else. It was about him stealing this election from the American public. And that's why you care.
That's an interesting point, Mark, because I agree with that analysis at the end of the day, because the political climate at that time would not have tolerated that storyline, would not have tolerated any of that, which is what the Fear of the Access Hollywood tape did in conjunction with the Stormy Daniels affair. That political climate in the country would have said, oh, hell no, we're not going there. So for Trump, it was a matter of corroding that political climate, bringing the political climate to where he is, right? So it becomes more accepting of this bad behavior, which is why you see, I think, a lot of the fractures across the country, the hardness of those who are supporting a guy that 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, there's no way, because culturally, politically, the country was in a very different place. And he has, in many respects, effectively moved it closer to his view of these things, where they're less important. It's more about him. He's the victim versus what it would have been otherwise. So I think Katie makes interesting points. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think two things. The first is, I do want to put us all back in that time frame, as you point out, Michael. I was the general counsel to the Clinton campaign at the time. Donald Trump was reeling from the Access Hollywood tape. As you recall, one of the only times you've ever seen Donald Trump have to show contrition was after that Access Hollywood tape, because it was so serious. And to me, the most the key moment of the trial politically for me was actually Hope Hicks's testimony, where she sort of acknowledges, or not sort of, she acknowledges that this would have been the end of the campaign. Had this come out, this would have been the end of their campaign. And, I tweeted shortly after the verdict that for those of us who worked for Hillary Clinton or were supporters of her, this proved something we always suspected, that but for his criminal acts, he wouldn't have beaten her that election. And so I want to give her that due. We talk a lot about he wouldn't have been president, but who would have been president would have been Hillary Clinton. Well, Hillary Clinton would have appointed 2 justices to the U.S. Supreme Court. Hillary Clinton would have been in charge of healthcare policy and foreign policy, and our country would look very different today, but for the crimes that he engaged in to win that election. And so I think that's important. The other thing you say, Michael, that I do think is worth pointing out is that it also hardened the Republican Party into believing that criminal acts were part of the political process. And so, we now see a Republican Party that is bragging how much money it raises off of felony convictions, and it has transformed the Republican Party into a party led by a crime boss that celebrates crimes.
That kind of sums it up right there.
See, Mark Elias putting a finer point on it. This point about what we call it and how this case is framed, I think is absolutely critical. And I really think that what Lachlan Cartwright was saying in the last hour before we came to you all about making sure the American people understand what this is really about, that he will do anything. He, as in Donald Trump, will do anything to try to hold on to power. He did what he needed to do. He crimed and he lied about the crimes and covered up the crimes in 2015, 2016 because he wanted to be president. He lied and tried to bully the American people and lied and lied and lied and tried to subvert the election in 2020. And then when that didn't work, he helped instigate January 6th. And if people don't think that he will do the same thing this time, they are literally, they must have been living under a rock with headphones on.
So the destruction of norms is something we talk about a lot on this show, on my show, and on the other programs. And one of the biggest institutions and that's why I admire Mark Elias so much, is that the rule of law is something that has to be protected all of the time, because it's not a convenient truth for only certain administrations or for only certain people. And so when you don't have that protected, when you have Congress that's compromised, the Oval's compromised, SCOTUS is compromised, where is the safe space for justice to live and to breathe and to survive? And that is exactly what has happened. And I think what was smart actually about maybe starting it with the delineation of calling it the hush money, but making sure that you understood that it was election interference is it made it relatable in so many different ways.
But can we just be honest with ourselves? It was the press that started calling it the hush money case, the media apparatus, and we can defend it all we would like, but that was wrong to do. It was wrong. The media apparatus sat around tables, not us, but other people sat around tables and were like, this is just a hush, this is about a porn star and a president. And that was not correct. And if it were up to the media apparatus, the jury probably wouldn't have understood it. So I thank God that the actual lawyers in the courtroom for DA Bragg knew what they were doing and put this in the correct frame. The DA never framed it that way. In the indictment, it never said hush money. So we was wrong.
Yeah, and I think that also, to both your points, and it sort of broadens it out a little bit more, because, Mark, you have now, a letter from Senate Republicans, 8 of them, vowing to oppose all non-defense spending, Biden nominees, and Democratic legislation. This really goes to what Katie was just talking about, that, where's the safe space for justice, right? So you create that safe space, but then you've got the political consequence by illiberal, unprincipled individuals like Mike Lee, J.D. Vance, Tommy Tuberville, Eric Schmidt, Marsha Blackburn, Rick Scott, Roger Marshall, and Marco Rubio, right? Who now want to penalize the justice system for doing what it was supposed to do, right? Which was to adjudicate the facts in front of it. And 12 peers of Donald Trump decided, you're guilty. And now they want to haul Bragg in police, you got to tell us, all the fraud and all the lies that you made up to convict Donald Trump. How do we rectify this? I mean, because I don't know, I'm going to be straight up about it. I don't think a lot of Democrats in the political world appreciate the urgency of this moment. And are still sort of piddling around with this idea that somehow stuff like this, using the system against the system, is not political fodder to go after.
Yeah, I think that one of the great tragedies of our time is how unseriously we take the threats that Donald Trump is to the political system and to democracy as a whole. I mean, the fact is, we now know he committed crimes to win his first election. We know that he incited a violent insurrection and crimes to try to overturn his second election. We are now 5 months from his third election, and what is it about his behavior that leads us to believe we won't see further criminal acts? And with respect to the Republican Party, there was not that long ago when we were told that the likes of Marco Rubio and Tim Scott represented the moderates in the Republican wing of the party. Well, Tim Scott has said he won't accept the outcome of the election. Marco Rubio has said that and now wants to say that that courts shouldn't operate. There is no moderate wing of the Republican Party. And I wish we would, the mainstream media, not you all, but when I see others in the media, I wish they would just acknowledge this. I understand they are looking for that unicorn, but they don't exist. When Donald Trump says that he won 6 elections in 2020 that he didn't, they are all going along with it. When he said recently that he won Minnesota, you didn't see any of them say he didn't, even though he lost by 7 percentage points. And by the way, and Michael Steele, you were party chair, so mark my words. He gave a rally in New York in which he said he believes he will win New York and he believes he will win New Jersey. By the time we get to Election Day, Donald Trump and the Republican Party will be saying he won all 50 states. You think it's crazy today, but I am here to tell you, you people thought I was crazy in 2020.
I wanted to add something which now seems pretty small in response to what you said, which is these 8, I would call them the Gang of 8, but Gang of 8 is already taken. None of these people are the people who are negotiators and actually getting bipartisan legislation done. None of them were actually going to vote for these. So the fact that they're like real brave and real strong, getting together to write a strongly worded letter is pretty pathetic.
And I'll just leave that there because that's exactly right. It is pathetic.